Cooper's Corner in association with Mini Canada. I'm Charlie Cooper, and over the 3 weeks, we're interviewing some most important names behind the Mini brand. Today's guest is design legend Frank Stephenson. So Frank is obviously famous for designing the first BMW Group Mini back in 2000, but his history of design is incredible. He's responsible for some of the most special cars I think I can remember over the last 20 to 30 years. They include BMW's X5, which was BMW's first ever SUV, the Ferrari 430, the Maserati MC12, one of my personal favorites, the Fiat 500, and he created the design language for the Mclaren road range, which included obviously the P1, its first hypercar. So without further ado, hello, Frank.
Let's start my video. Hey.
There you are. How you doing?
Hey, Charlie, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad. How you been in lockdown?
Not too bad, actually. It's been a real good chance to actually spend more time, obviously, on lots of different projects, but thinking quite a bit, which is what all designers love to do, think. And actually, the opportunity to be creative has been absolutely awesome. It seems like a lot of the companies out there are looking for, at this time, ways to stimulate the creativity in their organizations, above all the curiosity. But yeah, so I think I'm probably busier than ever right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you've ever been anything like me, I've been too many trips to the fridge. It's too easy when you're working from home.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of lucky. I've got a separate studio, so I don't actually have a fridge in here, but I stay hydrated.
Oh. That's important. It looks like you've got a glass of Ribena maybe next year. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's my version of Kool-Aid and keeps me hydrated most of the day. It's not really. It's got some good ingredients in it to go along with the hydration. So, a friend of mine, Kevin Maroney, has kept me in good stead with what I have to be putting into my body, on a daily basis. So it's good. Well,
I've got a little story for Ribena. Maybe we'll come to that later. But what I'm going to say, there's a load of interested fans out there. So please, everyone who's watching along, can you type any questions you've got either on YouTube or on Facebook, wherever you're watching? And towards the end of the interview, we can hopefully get some of those questions to Frank. So yeah, please fire away with the questions. But in terms of my questions, Frank, I think one of the first things I want to ask you is about your history as a professional motocross rider. I've obviously taken up a racing career recently, but I want to know, how did you make that transition from being a pro racer on a bike to a designer?
Well, granted, it's not really a normal transition to go from flat out on a motorcycle to sitting behind a desk and drawing something. That's a pretty wild spectrum in terms of things to do with your life. But you can't get more of a natural high than riding the motorcycle. I think it's probably one of the most awesome things that you can do. If you've never ridden a motorcycle, it's very liberating, and you're connected with a machine. If you love machines, that's probably the best way to become one with the machine. There's not a lot of protection around you, but if you ride safe and you're aware, then it's very fun to push it to your limits, obviously. So I've always enjoyed that, and I took it to wouldn't call it an extreme level, but racing at the top level is as good as it gets in terms of racing and riding bikes. So I was able to spend a good chunk of my youth, 6-7 years, dedicated to riding. But the problem, or I wouldn't say a problem, but the thing that happened was I did get to the top level, but I was still riding in the middle of the pack. And in the middle of the pack in racing, as you well know, it's as if you're finishing last. In racing, the only position that counts is number one, and I wasn't finishing at the top of the podium often enough. So I got some great advice from my father, which at the time seemed like not good advice because it was my life. It was what I really had a passion and loved doing. That competition spirit was very much alive in me at the time. So but because he could see that I wasn't really making the sufficient progress after so many years of doing it, he told me, didn't tell me, he advised me that I should probably get into something that would be a bit longer lasting for my future and make more sense actually. So I was always a kid who spent a lot of time at home drawing when he was growing up, and my mother actually had to boot me out of the house to get me to get some fresh air most of the time. But I loved drawing, and that actually transitioned as my father got a car dealership in the 60s, and I started getting interested in cars, and I naturally tended to start drawing cars as young kids do. And without really knowing that drawing cars was a profession, I just took to it and spent so much time doing it that I think I just naturally developed almost a hidden talent, maybe that was there, but needed nurtured.
What cars did you draw when you were a kid? What was your favorite car?
These cars didn't exist. Designers aren't really the most sane people, even when they're young. I used to design things that didn't exist quite a bit. It was my imagination flowing free, and I was able to draw what I wanted to, and obviously it was fun for me and imagining what cars in the future would look like. But like I said, I had no idea at that stage of my life that was actually something you could do and make good money for it. But anyways, I did that, and when it came time, my father said, you got to make a big decision in your life. Do you want to reach 30 years old and all broken up and, not really have achieved too much in your life, or you should actually get serious about life and go study or work for me at the dealership? So I chose to study, and I went off, had just learned about Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. And so that next step was obviously let's shoot for the top in car design. I had a passion, obviously, for cars. I had a passion for art and design and science, and I think it was the perfect combination of those passions and interests that allowed me to, first of all, get into the university, and even harder still, get through it. That school is absolutely at the limit for getting through. So I did that. So basically, that's how I went from racing to racing in a different sense into the future.
And that's just it. Do you think the competitive spirit, you obviously had that to get to a high level in motocross, do you think that's helped you along your career and kind of really pushed you?
I think it's really helped me in everything, not just my career there, Charlie. I think with that kind of mental attitude, all of us should have it. Not all of us do have it, but when you do have it, it takes you far. It takes you to another level or levels. I don't know if I was born competitive. I just know that I am right now. I absolutely hate to lose. Maybe from racing, you're disappointed when you either break down along the way, you don't finish the race. Obviously, if you can't finish the race, you can't win. You have to win or finish to win. But that competitive desire to get at the top of the podium was already there when I started racing. So maybe it's a genetic thing that I had, that I have to, be at the top or just try something else. I guess it's that kind of all or nothing approach. But like I said, I think it's the main thing in life for all of us. If we want to be truly satisfied and happy with ourselves, if you can get through life feeling that you couldn't have given 1% more, that push that you have will always take you pretty far. So I think it pays off in the end to not slack off.
Sure. I noticed your T-shirt just as you logged on. Ayrton was one of my heroes. It is Ayrton, isn't it? Did you have any heroes growing up? Obviously,
I had lots of heroes. Yeah, heroes that you wouldn't even know about. But I would have to absolutely say that my ultimate hero was my father. I grew up thinking that my father was actually Clark Kent and Superman. So I thought when he dressed normal, he was actually Clark Kent. And I kid you not, until I was probably about 6 years old, I believed he was the real Superman. Seriously, and I don't know, that he stood by me my whole life as a real figure of trying to emulate somebody that you completely respect. It just happened to be my father. It could be anybody. But in my youth, I had a huge respect for anybody who was in sports and at the top level. And my father was very much into sports, into racing, and into taking care of his body.
Mhm.
So I got a big interest when I was young into bodybuilding, and I grew up with a passion for exercise and working out. And I had my heroes back then, probably not so much known in the automotive circles, but people watching might recognize or know who Dave Draper is, or Arnie
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger. A few of the people from that side of the business. But gradually, as I got a bit older and started to study and learn things, one of my main influences, still to this day, is he's been dead for hundreds of years, but it was Leonardo da Vinci.
Wow.
I think that culmination of genius in being able to do so many things. He was he was very Renaissance man in many ways. I admire people who can probably be experts at so many different things.
Yeah.
You know, too oftentimes you get spread thin, and you're expert at a lot of stuff, but you're not really a master of any of them. So the people who can actually master many different disciplines have always been very special for me.
That must be one of the reasons why you've had such a varied career as well. Because if you look at what you've had to design, from sports cars through to the Mini, which we'll come to, you've had a huge breadth of tasks in terms of what you've designed. So I suppose that's kind of been part of what you.
Yeah, that wasn't my desire to design a wide range of cars. I never planned my career out that way. What I did plan out was that if a better opportunity ever came along, I would jump for it, because the only way to get somewhere in life, I mean, it's very rare that somebody stays in one place all his life and climbs the ladder. That doesn't happen in today's modern society enough. I think the way you rise to the top usually is by accepting change as the norm, or welcoming change. Too many of us get fixed in a rut and sort of one track it too long, and you start getting a little bit bored, fed up. Maybe it's going good for you, but you'll have your good days and your boring days. But I've been able to, I wouldn't call it jump ship, but look for the right opportunity that would take me to the next level. So that was always my view, is professional view, is if something, not that I would just go out and search for it, but you actually have to be receptive to the energy of the universe.
Yeah.
That throws constantly different opportunities your way.
Yeah,
and if you tag in on the right one, and you do a smart evaluation, your research and due diligence, as they call it, if you make the right moves, eventually you'll climb up to where you really want to be in life. And I managed to be in the right place at the right time. That obviously plays a huge part. I don't really believe in luck. I mean, luck is what we make of it. If you push yourself to be in the right situation or take the right opportunities, that's basically luck. What you make of it is up to you. Yeah, it's been a incredible ride. I wouldn't design my career any other way than it's turned out. But again, you just got to be ready to change. It's hard. Nobody really likes change. It's risky and never guaranteed. But really, if you go for it, typically change results in something better than you had before.
I also imagine dealing with pressure as well, which you've had to do obviously throughout your career. I watched, which I really enjoyed actually, the documentary on Netflix, Chasing Perfect.
Oh yes.
There was a lot of things I didn't realize about your career, but I saw that you designed the X5 in pretty much record time in Italy. But that must have been incredible pressure quite early on in your career. So.
That's an interesting one, Charlie, because I think pressure is relative. If you don't have confidence in yourself, typically you'll feel pressure, and you can't be overconfident, because then you don't really perform to the best of your abilities anyways. And there's a fine balance between being confident and overconfident. You have to sort of nail it in between, because obviously 6 weeks to turn a car from nothing, from a spark, as we call it, in your brain, in your creative side of your brain, into a real product, 1-to-1 scale, and you stand back and look at it and have that actually accomplished to that level in 6 weeks is, I don't know of any project car design wise, has ever been done that quickly. But I mean, you don't do it yourself. Obviously, you have a great team of modelers working with you, and I worked with the best 3 modelers in the world when I did that project. I mean, that counted for an obvious amount because I can have an idea, but at the end of the day, if it can't be turned into 3D, I can design the best looking car in the world, but I need somebody to actually build that idea for me. And you'll get different results with different people working with you. And you got to form sort of a very close bond with that team of modelers, sculptors who are working with you, so that you're on the same wavelength. They enjoy working with you. If you ask for the most minute change in design, which might be less than a millimeter of raising a line up or down, they'll do it willingly for you and not have this friction that oftentimes you have between, for example, design and engineering. It's oftentimes that there's a little bit of a friction there. But if you can get along with your coworkers and people who are working with you, the projects turn out really good. I mean, those 3 guys, again, to clarify it a little bit, they weren't 3 normal Italian modelers. We actually modeled the X5 in Turin, Italy, at a hole-in-the-wall studio in the outskirts of Turin. And those 3 modelers, when I met them, this was April '94, because I remember Senna. We were watching the race on TV when that happened. But in April '94, they were in their early 70s. And I remember when I met them, I was really concerned. And I mentioned to the translator, the Italian translator, are these 3 guys going to be capable of working, that long each day? I mean, at least 18 hours, 7 days a week, in 6 weeks. I mean, they might kip over and one of them's going to have a heart attack or just not show up to work or something. That's going to be a lot of pressure on their side to deliver something that quickly. And the translator said to me, "Don't worry, these are the same 3 guys when they were in their late 20s that actually built the Lamborghini Miura." And that
beautiful car,
my knees in front of them, that was like, oh my gosh, these are the best of the best. So it's you have to have good ingredients to get a good product. But when you can match all those different energies together, that kind of passion and that experience and knowledge, how can you make a mistake? So
amazing.
But again, I don't think it was pressure, Charlie. I think it was just the case on, okay, somebody's got to do it, and I've done some projects before, not that they set me up for life or anything like that, but I had that inner confidence that I could achieve it. I didn't know what the result was going to be. I didn't know it was going to be successful or not. But obviously, the X5 is, put a stone in the ground for all future SUVs or SAVs after that. So it came out all right.
And like you said, you had the confidence of people around you. And one car, before we get on to the Mini, because I know there's a lot of Mini fans that want to ask you questions and want to talk about that. And that's obviously why we're here, is the Mini. I want to ask you about the Ford Escort Cosworth, and especially the spoiler which you designed, which we actually see live on today. When you look at the current Mini range, there's the GP3 that's just been launched with a very big spoiler. That's kind of a big design aspect of it. Why do you think that the Ford Escort was probably one of the started that trend in many ways? Why do you think it caught on so much? And also, I also saw in the documentary about it being based on a 3 spoiler design, like the Fokker airplanes. Why, how do you deal with the fact that your design kind of gets cut down sometimes?
You deal with it very hard because during the design process, the design that you're doing becomes a very personal, emotional. You develop a personal, emotional connection that's very hard to describe to anybody outside of the business that we're in. So you might think that the car is just an object, but you're creating something with as much energy as you have for anything in your life, that it's equivalent. I mean, I've never had children. I wish I had, but I've never had children. But I can imagine that attachment to your creation, or that bond as it's being developed in those 9 months, as we call it, is about the same amount of strength. So obviously, if somebody comes around and tells you when your kid's being shown around the world, and they tell you that it's dressed funny and your kid doesn't look very pretty, or he's not very handsome, or your girl's not quite as cute as you think it is, it's a personal attack on you. So I obviously, when that decision was made not to do it, took it very personally and hard. I was still pretty young in my career, so I hadn't developed any thick rhino skin yet. But you learn as you go along that there are a lot of compromises that have to be made during the development process, and also to emphasize that there's a sort of a feeling that this three-wing project is a myth or had actually never actually taken place. I relish the day when it comes out in a book that I'm writing or having written at the moment, when it's proven and shown to the world that those who doubt are gonna, you know, us believers will have the last laugh on that. So hope that satisfies a few of the people asking if it was real or not. But you'll see the actual proof of it. So what it did do was obviously as a young designer, you're not that skilled in terms of knowing so much about aerodynamics. But my philosophy was having designed it or having the design project taking place for the wings that I worked on in Germany. I got influenced by the Fokker DR1, the Red Baron plane, and I thought, as a young designer, what cooler than to have three wings on the back of the car. I didn't even call them spoilers. I mean, that almost has a negative effect or connotation to it. But to put three wings on the back of an airplane, back of a car, and actually flip them upside down because you want downforce instead of lift, I thought, this has got to work. I mean, it works on an airplane. Why wouldn't it work on a car? And it worked. It worked incredibly well. And it also gave it an identity that no other car had ever had in the back.
Yeah.
And so when it did come out, and obviously it lost one of the wings, the middle one, because they were saving 5 German Deutschmarks on it, it hurt me, but it didn't hurt anybody else who hadn't been involved in that project of doing it. So they didn't, general public had no idea what it could have been like until Wheeler Dealers with Ant and Mike, great guys, actually managed to put it out there as it could have been sort of project.
Yeah.
And it resonated very well. And obviously it was very debatable between a lot of people if it was good or better or worse, but that's designed for you.
They said it stuck to the road though. Definitely handled even better.
It did more than stick to the road. I think it attached itself to the road. It was just a mega increase in downforce. You shoot for downforce to be small increments, unless you do something radical, and like Gordon Murray now with his T50, the vacuum car. But when you do a manual modification or improvement to the car to gain that much more downforce, is I wouldn't call it genius because I wasn't a genius doing it. I just thought it could work, and it worked. So, radical solutions oftentimes are the best ones. You know how a lot of your father is the best advocate of that, and also Bruce Mclaren. They would just basically go with their gut instinct, do something radical to the design. That aero engineers oftentimes aero guys will get it wrong because we all know aerodynamics is a black magic. It's very hard to know if something is going to work or not simply by looking at it on paper or reading some numbers. You need the seat of the pants type.
Yeah, absolutely. I've read some stories about my grandfather actually in the 50s and 60s. Aerodynamics was more about intuition and less about engineers. And I read stories about the first Cooper Streamliner, that they had this great idea that they modeled, and as soon as they tried it on track, it just kept taking off. So they had to scrap that idea.
That's scary. And that was probably at pretty high speed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Those engineers had two big ones.
The drivers especially had big cojones.
Still recovering
Let's jump onto the Mini, because I know there's a lot of people that want to hear about the process, and like I say, it's been documented, but there's a few things I want to ask you about. Specifically, we spoke about compromise with the Ford. It seemed like the Mini, when you had that huge challenge to redesign the icon that was the original Mini in 2000, seemed like there wasn't much compromise, because a lot of your ideas were quite unique. I mean, I'm sure you will tell me about some of the compromises, but like the clamshell bonnet, the rear tail lights, how they were molded into the fenders, which you've spoken about before. How did you find the process, and what were the challenges you came across when designing the car?
Well, I got to tell you first, Charlie, that the car was never designed, never intended. I never intended the car to be called a retro car or intended to be a retro design. That, for me, is just not my style. I mean, I can design something to look old, or I can make it look retro. But designers, I think the best designers don't look back; they look forward in any way and shape in life. Anybody who looks backwards, okay, it's great to remember your history and not make the same mistakes, but you don't develop something to go backwards. You develop it to go forward. So obviously, when I designed the new Mini, there was a process that I went through to sort of generate a life cycle that didn't exist. And that life cycle was to basically create a car that had come out 40 years ago, um, to design its successor 40 years later, but to maintain that emotional connection with the past, but use technology of the future. In other words, that car would be the natural successor 40 years later, the one I did. And so you should obviously see some kind of connection. I look at you, and I can definitely see traces of your grandfather in your physical, appearance, and probably also if I learned, we spent a week together, I'd see characteristics of your grandfather in you, and even
it's probably
more
the big Cooper nose. I mean, my grandfather had the big nose, so.
had a nose that very distinctive nose. Yeah, a bit different from the bulldog nose,
Yeah, it was.
on the other side. But again, so the challenge was to design the 21st century Mini. Now, how do you do that? You can't just repeat what's been done before, but you still have to maintain the look or the feel or the emotional fun factor that the Mini had. So obviously, anything that I designed, I had to make sure when I designed it that it was almost impossible at the time when I designed it, impossible for the engineers to build it. That would guarantee that when the car did come out, which we estimated would be around the year 2000, that it would be modern and still live on, because you don't want the car to get old after a year. And the new Mini's actually proven that a lot of the design solutions that did come out on the 2000 car have still stayed the test of time. They're still on the car today, 20 years after I did it. So a lot of those things I did, I knew they were going to be difficult, to say the least, for the engineers to put into practice, but it wasn't impossible. I don't think there's much that's impossible in car design to begin with, but obviously you have to you have to be responsible in your design, and not everything can be done on a profitable scale. Let's call it that way. But at the same time, I knew that different solutions had to be innovative. And that clamshell bonnet on the or hood on the Mini was one of the things I wanted to absolutely not give up, simply because, for one thing, it was a new approach to, although clamshell bonnets have existed, in the past for many years. The E-Type Jag has the most beautiful clamshell bonnet you've ever seen. But with the new Mini, the way we did it was innovative because it was impossible to press that much metal into one beautiful swelling shape. It was a huge piece of metal that had to be hit once, and you had to make that central shape that the Mini bonnet has perfectly, and that wasn't easy. And we had some really good engineers figure out a very innovative way of pressing the metal such that it did work out. But again, wraparound glass, it looks great in architecture, but how do you put pillars behind the glass on a Mini Cooper in the 21st century? It was innovative. The engineers were, no, we need A pillars, B pillars, and C pillars to be shown, and then we'd build the glass up to it. But I thought this very clean, modern architectural design of the glass actually wrapping around the cabin would give it a real super modern feel, which it did. And then obviously the taillights were very distinctive on the original Mini, and the way they were placed, it just doesn't happen today because it's too expensive to do it. Back then they could do it by hand. There weren't that, it wasn't out of the question to produce it that way. But today's production methods don't allow you really to put a tail light isolated within the rear fender. And I had to fight for that. But if you look at the Mini now, basically, like I said, it still looks pretty good. I mean, it doesn't look dated. It's kind of that, Marilyn Monroe would still look good today kind of approach. And it still exudes that character, that fun character that we tried to keep, and Dennis the Menace kind of feel, that it's a little bit naughty, but it's the cute kid.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of have respect for him, because if you don't watch it, he's gonna bite your ankle, But it was fun. I really enjoyed finding and testing the limits of design with the Mini, and I think the 21st Century Mini was a worthy successor of the original.
In that process, did you? I know you met my grandfather, but did you have any interactions with him about the design or in that process?
That's a great story, Charlie. I don't want to go on too long about it, because we'll run out of questions and time for the questions. But I met your father completely as if the stars had aligned on that day. And we talked about it before. I remember telling you, I can remember exactly the day, and it will never go out of my mind. It was 15th of November, 1996. I had just come over from Germany to take my design from the full-size clay phase to put it into production. And BMW seconded me, or sent me to Rover Design Studios, who own Mini, to work for the next 5 years on putting my design into reality through the clay design phase. And I was locked up in a hotel for 5 years, a little small hotel in Leamington Spa. But it was probably the best time of my life, because I was still, at that stage where you still have to prove that to yourself that you're good. So the Mini project was absolutely the biggest thing I had going. But digressing. On the 15th of November, I was invited by a colleague who was the actual interior designer of the Mini, Eric Bellinger, as a welcoming present, having come to England, to go on that day, the 15th of November, down to London, so halfway across the country, for the 1996 Motorsport Awards ceremony at the Dorchester Hotel. And we drove down there in my Z3 or Z3, dressed in our tuxedos, because it was a very classy event, and we felt like Bond. And I don't know if I was the good guy or the bad guy, but we both looked like characters out of the film, dressed up in a Bond car, and felt pretty special when we walked in. But we had no idea what the event was going to be all about, or the organization of it. So we're having our cocktail drinks in the room there, and it was just a who's list of automotive personalities. And you could name the personality, he was there. And I looked across the room and I saw your grandfather, and that was a shock to me, because I had no idea. I knew your father because I'd researched quite a bit, or your grandfather because I researched him quite a bit before I really got into the Mini project. But to actually have him standing there, 20 feet away, it was unreal or surreal. I approached him and said, Mr. Cooper, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you here tonight. I had no idea I'd ever see you in my life, but I just wanted to say hello. And he said, your grandfather, how friendly he is. Well, my boy, how are you, and where are you from, and what are you doing here? And I felt very out of place, but I said, well, I shouldn't say this, but you're the right guy to tell it to. I'm actually just been over here for a few days, and I've been sent over from BMW to design or carry out the design of my Mini Cooper that's been chosen. And he said, Mini? BMW's making a new Mini? And I said, yeah, and that's about all I can tell you. Of course, he wanted to know more, because I think he could foresee the connections. That night, he did win the Motorsport Personality of the Decade. Amazing. And he came down off the podium and came straight over to my table with your father, Mike. And they stood on both sides of me. And obviously, people were thinking, well, who's this guy that John and Michael Cooper are talking to? Nobody recognizes him. All the people at my table sitting around were like, why are they talking to this guy? He's a young, fresh-faced guy that nobody knows. And it turns out that your grandfather wanted to introduce Michael to me, your father, and we hit it off right there from the start.
Wow.
And then I was invited down to Worthing to see the dealership and the whole setup with the Minis, all the Cooper improvements and enhancements that you guys were doing. And from there, we started a great, great relationship that lasted, well, with your father, it still lasts today, but with your grandfather up to the 24th of December of 2000.
Yeah.
And I made it a point to get your grandfather to come over to see the design model in the design studio about once a month during the process, just to keep him on board, because I think you would expect him to say yes, I like it, because he didn't want the project to die. But I think he truly was impressed
Yeah.
with the design and put his full backing behind it. And just a very, very great way to meet somebody and to carry on this relationship with them. You're a very lucky guy to have him as your grandfather.
No, I get quite emotional talking about it sometimes, because obviously I remember when he was quite ill towards the end of his life. But I think seeing your design and seeing that the Mini and the Mini Cooper especially had a future, that his legacy would live on. I think that was something that he kind of, even when he was ill, he could be happy in the fact that he knew that legacy would live on. So I think it was a special time for him, definitely.
I bet. I mean, I think the thing that he really appreciated was that we didn't just go off on one, and design the German Mini. There was a true respect, I think, that was handled correctly in actually letting the engineering, although with, of course, a little bit of engineering from BMW, but the engineering was done in England. The whole clay model to production was done at the Gaydon Studios in England. So it became sort of an English car again. I mean, although the owners were German, they kept a certain respect and they wanted to make sure that it wasn't seen as a German car, although basically it was a small BMW if you wanted to analyze it. But that just made the quality better and the car, last and last. And the factory being built near Oxford created a huge, workforce for it, and dealerships that sprung up. So it's a great thing that it hasn't slipped off the map, as a brand. And now it's got, an eternal future ahead of it. And, I'm sure he's looking down at us saying,
oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. And also, I think he would have been proud of my father in terms of what he did with the John Cooper Works brand. I think that's kind of continued the legacy even more.
Yeah, you've just made it better. That's what Cooper does with the Mini, doesn't it? Make it better. They make it a giant killer. It's always been a giant killer.
It's always got to be a giant killer. Oh, did you take any, when you, obviously, like you said, you kept my grandfather involved in the process of seeing the clay models, but what was because the car was launched as a Mini Cooper. It wasn't just a Mini. The Mini Cooper existed from launch. I mean, one, why did you think that was so important to the BMW Group and yourself in terms of launching with a Cooper? And two, what was the inspiration that you specifically took from the Cooper story?
So when 15 designers around the world were tasked with submitting design proposals for the new Mini, we all were able to design it with the freedom that we could interpret it as our interpretation. We could deliver it as our interpretation of the 21st century Mini. Whether you grasp inspiration from the original or not was up to you. So obviously there were designs submitted of the 15. We had extremes from where the designer basically didn't put a lot of effort into coming up with a new solution, but basically just scaled the old Mini up. So that was pretty much the basic design. To the other side of the spectrum, where I often say it's like somebody was smoking something, but we don't know what it was. But the idea he submitted, his design was nothing like a Mini. And I think that we needed to achieve, I felt strongly, we needed to achieve something that kept the Mini-esqueness about the car. I'm running out of memory of what the question was.
Just the Cooper, what inspiration from Cooper and the history and the heritage from Cooper,
yeah. So when I did my design, obviously you're going to have a base Mini, you're going to have Cooper Mini, and we'd do a Cooper S, because that's how Mini was pretty much in the beginning. We had those levels, not at the very beginning, but it evolved into Mini Cooper and Cooper S. So I was thinking along the lines, this is going to happen to the Mini at some point when it does come out. So instead of designing the ultimate Mini Cooper S, which turned out to be the supercharged Mini, and instead of designing the base Mini, which is going to be pretty, bland almost, not bland, but just not exciting. And I thought, why don't I just nail it right down the middle and design the Mini Cooper? So the model I designed was always intended to be the Mini Cooper. If you look at those original clay models that I did, the clay model designs, when they were shown, they all represent what today is considered the Mini Cooper. And so that was my inspiration, because I know that, we could have gone not overboard, but we could have started putting the wings on it and the wider spats and all kinds of things to make it look as wouldn't say sexy, but aggressive, or not even aggressive, just cooler, more Mini Cooper-esque. But I think handling it right down the middle was the right solution, and we did that. And then when we finally got the car to the production level, then we had to do the Cooper S and the Mini 1. So we had to look at ways to make it stronger and ways to make it more normal, I guess you could say. And we don't like normal in design, but you can offer a car that basically is your low end, say, entry level Mini. So the Mini was basically detuned, you could call it, for the Mini, and it was tuned up with the supercharger and with different color coded combinations and wheel sizes and different things for the Cooper S. But I was involved with all three of those, and it was just fun knowing that the customer was going to have a great choice of minis to choose from.
I loved the whine of the supercharger from the R53. I do miss that a little bit. I know we don't have as many superchargers nowadays because of fuel efficiency, but I do love the supercharger whine.
We miss it. That was so special with the Cooper S. If you have a choice between a turbocharger and a supercharger, why would you go with the turbo?
Yeah. Sadly, because of fuel efficiency, I think we see a lot more turbos, but still amazing things that you can do with a turbo nowadays. I know we've got something special to show people because I was going to ask you about how did you see, obviously the Mini is still a huge success today in 2020, and a lot of the design language is kind of similar to what you started. It carries on in what you see in the current cars today. But what did you see as the future of the Mini design? What did you see, in 10 years from that 2000 model? I know we've got something special to show, but can you just tell me what was your vision and how it differs?
Well, that's a bit of a premiere today, I guess. Remember John, when we were talking about it. The fact is, forgive me because you guys look all very similar. I'm like talking to the young version of John Cooper right now. I think, the way I did it, like I said, was we had 1 month to design the car, all the designers in the world. We had 1 month to come up with a 2D image of what the new Mini could look like for the 21st century, which is not a lot of time, but if you need more, you're missing something. So you're not onto it anyways. You might as well try something else. But okay, so instead of jumping out of the box, like gun goes off or the flag goes down, you're off, which is what 14 other designers did. I was able to contact them after the project and speak with them individually and find out where they got their inspirations from and all that. But nobody actually did the same process that I did, which was instead of jumping out and trying to design the 21st century Mini from the beginning, I did the first week. I designed what could have been the 69 Mini. And obviously the second week I did the 79, 89. The last week was the 99 Mini. So that gave me that genetic or DNA link that we speak about, that family feeling with the past in a modern way. But what I never showed the world, and I never talked about it, and never wanted to show anybody because I was just, not thinking I'd nail it or not. I had no idea. But I've always kept it to myself, and you're first guy that can actually show it to the world here. It's an important date and talk. Was when I did that 99 Mini, I also, in the 5th week, when the project was starting to become a real physical model, I spent a week designing what I thought this Mini that was coming out, the 2000 Mini, what could it look like in the year 2009? So I did another jump in my evolutionary scale of the design of the Mini, such that I imagined what would this car look like 15 years from now, roughly. So in 95, I did a sketch that was the 2009 Mini. Now I have to say, and you know it now, that it looks nothing like today's Mini, which I think is, it can go either way. I think Mini have held on to BMW and Mini have held on to the design as another iconic interpretation, but pretty much it paints them into a corner where it's very difficult now to suddenly jump out and do something different. Whereas this sketch here, after the connection made in 2000, maybe this new sketch could have been the next direction, but it shows an electric. Basically, I was thinking about a small engine.
I was going to say it's we've got it up on screen now for people to see. It is different. You still have that mininess, but it is different to how the second and third generation Minis have looked. Like I say, you mentioned the electric, and we're launching the Mini Electric this year. But was that your view that it was purely an electric vehicle, that version?
Well, no, I mean, back then, designers tend to think 8 to 10 years in advance, anyways, when they're designing cars. Otherwise, if you don't think that far ahead, your product is going to be old when it hits the market. And that's going to kill it. So you have to be in a bit of a fantasy world when you're designing. So, electric engines back then, we started with electric engines, the automotive industry. They were before the petrol engine. So it wasn't a mystery to me that we could power a car with a small electric motor. And my whole thought was geared towards the original philosophy that Isagones had, which was make a big car on the inside and make it small on the outside. A little bit of an oxymoron. But at the same time, if you can achieve an incremental gain to the interior space without making the car bigger, that is the direction the Mini should take. So I thought by putting a small electric motor in the front of the car, we could actually grow the interior cabin more than it is currently, or in the year 2000. And so what I did was basically extend the greenhouse and turn it into what, maybe even the i3 you were speaking before about the i3, that sort of portion. But basically what you're doing is growing the inside of the car, and I kept it 3.6, just over 3.6 meters long. So it's as big as, or the same size as the Mini that came out in 2000. It's no bigger than that. But the space inside is quite a bit bigger. And I kept a lot of Mini traits that I brought in on the 2001. So there was a lot of that clamshell that we were speaking about, the vent on the side, the taillights in the back. I had to raise the header, or where the roof and the glass meet together. I had to raise that because by pulling the front windscreen or windshield forward, you're going to start making almost like a letter box or post box slot to look out of. So I had to lift the header such that you could look up and see the stoplights and the traffic lights at an intersection. So you get a little bit more glass over the top. But I think the door swinging down, the bottom line of the door swinging down, that gives you some easy entry access for your feet. So thinking along comfort lines, getting rid of the pillar in the middle of the car behind the glass, making that all sort of like a glass cabin. Probably impossible, but hey, we got to stretch. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Frank, for sharing it. I know especially a lot of the Mini fans are going to be talking about it. I'm sure in the clubs and everything, they're going to be talking about the design. So I'll be interested to see their comments. Definitely.
It'll be one of those love it or hate it. I'm sure it's not going to hurt me now. I do have thick skin, so they should actually critique it and say what they like and what they don't like. And it's a welcome, thing that you hear back from Mini fans that what their thoughts are. I don't think it's going to change the direction that Mini and BMW have taken, but at least it's food for thought for other designs in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. I'm going to obviously jump to something completely different, and that's when you move to Ferrari. There's obviously even a link. I think I spoke about it last week with Dad when we had our chat, that Ferrari does have a link with Cooper. It has that Formula One link. There's the link with Enzo Ferrari, who loved his Mini Cooper S. He was a passionate Mini driver. But how did you make that transition again from moving from Mini to designing the ultimate sports car, which is a Ferrari? And do you think the racing history, we spoke about the Cooper element in Mini, but in terms of design language, is there any elements you think you can kind of see there's similarities? Obviously, they're completely different cars, but any link you see from the racing element?
Absolutely. I think if you can prove yourself on the track, in the US, there's a type of racing called NASCAR stock car racing. In NASCAR, they have a saying, which is win on Sunday, sell on Monday. So if that car that is a stock car, not exactly stock, but it's a version of a factory viable car from the company. If that car wins on Sunday, basically it's proven itself to be a worthy car for you to buy on the road. So that mentality, I'm sure, is part of the Mini's appeal. That 60, what was it, 60, 64, 65, no, 63, 64, 65, and 66. But you know what happened in 66 in Monte Carlo? They ripped off and did the bad thing to Mini for being eliminated for the headlight bulbs. Anyways, it was a consistent winner at the rally in Monte Carlo. But basically, that winning factor of the Mini did promote it to being extremely desirable as a progressed. Obviously, people were buying all the versions. It became a fashion, the it car in countries around the world. It was the it car, no matter which one you had. And people oftentimes gave it names. They named it after somebody, or it was their Betsy, or Harry, or whatever the name of the car. But the transition from Mini to Ferrari, your first question, was completely unexpected. I mean, I was getting quite a few calls from other companies when I finished the Mini within the next year of having come back to BMW's headquarters in Munich and working there in the design studio and taking the Mini to the next level. There were quite a few calls, but I wasn't interested in leaving the company, BMW and Mini, at that time, because I had a great position there, and the future of the brand was ahead of me. And you're a papa, you don't want to leave your young family at that stage. But I did get a call through that was from one headhunter, and I had absolutely no idea what she was referring to, because she had this funny accent. And she said, I'm helping a company who's looking for a designer to lead, and for a very good position, and blah. And I'm like, yeah, but who are you? And she said, we cannot tell you over the phone. You have to come visit us, and then we'll see if we speak face to face, if you're the right person or whatever. I'm like, okay, it's just a day out, fly down to wherever it is or wherever it's at. And the ticket came. It was to fly to Turin, Italy, and my excitement, or not even excitement, my interest completely went downhill, because I thought, this is Fiat, Turin. Anybody in the automotive business knows that Turin is Fiat. And I was thinking, well, who wants to go from BMW or Mini BMW to Fiat? But let's see what they're offering. Went down there. We were having lunch with the design director of Fiat and the head of engineering and development. These two guys. And then at the end, during dessert, they mentioned, okay, we think you're the right guy. If you don't want the position, please don't talk about it to anybody, because it's a very strict thing. We're only checking a few people. But if you want the position of head of design of Ferrari and Maserati, is yours. And I basically just spit up whatever was in my mouth, and couldn't believe them, because I knew that Ferrari and Maserati don't have design directors, at least in that time. It was 2002. And I said, you guys have Pininfarina and Giugiaro that do your designs? And they said, yeah, and that's why we need somebody in-house at Ferrari and in-house also at Maserati, brother sister companies, to basically say yay or nay to the designs that we're getting from these guys. And we don't have anybody who's in that position who can capably say that. And I was flooded with emotion, and and it was kind of like like I mentioned, that when the Pope asks you to come to Rome, you don't say no, you just go. And I was kind of like, okay, Ferrari wants me, I'm going. Maserati. So I went down there completely, thinking I was out of my league, and this is going to be biting off more than I can chew. And it really affected me internally, because you have that fact, that feeling that maybe they've miscalculated. But it went really well, and I managed to put out 2 good designs for them, for Ferrari, and 2 great Maserati designs. And that kind of gave me a little bit more confidence, I guess you could say. So it put me up another notch.
No, absolutely. I mentioned at the start, the MC12 and the 430 are 2 of my favourite designs from those 2 brands. So, beautiful cars.
Good car. Expensive, but good.
It was expensive, yeah. I wish I could afford them, but especially the MC12. Talking of expensive cars, I've got a few more mini questions, but there's quite a few questions come through from the community. So I'm going to jump to Mclaren quickly, because I think what's interesting about your career, there is always a Cooper link somewhere. Because Mclaren, obviously, Bruce McLaren was a driver for my grandfather. He won Formula One Grand Prix in Coopers. And Ron Dennis actually worked for my grandfather as an apprentice way back. So Ron was the man, I think, that hired you at McLaren. Is that right?
Ron Dennis, yeah.
Yeah. So, what was it like moving, obviously, from Ferrari to McLaren? You had to create a whole design language for the road cars. I mean, that must have been a big challenge as well.
Yeah, but I think I wasn't afraid to do it. The thing is, when you start moving up, you do start relishing challenges like this. You live for the challenges. We don't get challenges enough in our lifetimes, I think. When you do get a challenge, step up to it. And you can get it wrong. Obviously, we all make errors of judgment, or we don't live up to what we think we're capable of doing. But what's life if you don't go for it? So the challenge of going to McLaren, which had no real automotive strategy in its history. It had obviously the F1, the three-seater, the SLR, which came after that in the early 2000s. Those were cars that McLaren could say, okay, we've worked on a few car projects, but it was nowhere near being what we consider a road car company. So when Ron Dennis and Anthony Sheriff both met me, or I met them, and we talked about the potential to create a road car company within McLaren's brand, or under McLaren's brand, it would become the Ferrari of England, of the UK, basically, because McLaren's a great racing car company. It always has been. The time with Ron Dennis was amazing. He made McLaren what it is, and the thought that if McLaren ever loses out on Formula One, in the sense that Formula One as a business goes downhill, they're not going to be left with much. So Ron's foresight saw that building a road car company could be very effective for the business. Race and road car relationship. And so he basically had Anthony Sheriff put together an amazing team of incredibly passionate car guys. Not your typical team of, this guy's been working in the industry and he's been all over the world and he knows numbers and things like that. No, these were guys who just lived cars 24 hours a day, or at least when they were awake, maybe dreamed about them otherwise. So this group of 8 or 9 of us were assembled for each of our responsibilities. And so when Ron said, "Look," and Anthony said, "We need a road car business. We need a design. We need a design language, and you can start from scratch, from a clean sheet of paper. There is no better design job opportunity or chance in anybody's life in the design world when he gets to be given a design responsibility for a company of the caliber of McLaren, where you can use that engineering depth and their engineers, obviously, who are coming from Formula One, to build an ultimate supercar, sports car, hybrid, whatever." So I jumped at it like, gosh, this is exactly the next big step. So, and it brought me to England, where I'm at now, and I've been thankful ever since for that opportunity.
I enjoyed when you in your Chasing Perfect film talking about the rear lights of the P1, and again, another beautiful car, very different to say the Ferraris, but just the details when you were talking about the rear lights and the frustration that it wasn't one piece. I mean, it's just incredible, that level of detail. And obviously critiquing your own designs when they come through to production, but I really enjoyed that.
As designers, you're never 100% happy with the finished product. It doesn't happen. If it does happen, you're not really a good designer, because you always have to have one better thought or one idea, at least one idea to improve what you've done. That's that idea of chasing perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. You're always chasing.
Doesn't exist.
So I'm not, I love the P1. I love all the cars that McLaren has done up to that point where I left, I guess. But they all had a real purposeful mission of design and engineering.
Another car I'd love to own. This is my dream garage. I'm going to ask you one more question, because I know I could ask you questions all day, Frank. This is brilliant. But we've got quite a few questions I'm going to go to from people who are asking questions on the chat. But just one question, which is obviously quite close to my heart, is I founded a bicycle company, Cooper Bikes, with my father. And I kind of see cities dominated by personal mobility products. I know that you've been working on the eVTOL aircraft. Is that how you say it? eVTOL? Yeah, the car. eVTOL.
The air taxis. I don't call them flying cars because they have nothing to do with a flying car. It's basically it's an aircraft or a vehicle that flies in the air and takes you from one place to another. Electrically, so very low noise. Let's call it very little pollution, if you want to say it, and very quickly and very efficiently. So it's the new traffic or new new age of mobility. That same kind of jump when we went from a horse riding horses to cars.
Yeah.
That's the jump that's happening now, and people are kind of incredulous that it's actually happening or going to happen in their lifetime. Believe me, whoever's watching this, in a few years, you will have the opportunity to go from the airport to the city center, which is very close to your destination, straight as a crow would fly, kind of lowish altitude, somewhere between 1,000 feet and 10,000 feet maybe, so no pressurized cabins, in total comfort at an exceptionally low cost for what the program is. Yeah. So they're coming very soon. They take off vertically, they land vertically, and they go very efficiently through the air. And obviously, they have to be incredibly safe. So there's a certification process that they have to go through. So it's not just everybody for their own. They're controlled flights. And the pilots on board at the beginning will eventually be replaced, and that pilot seat will be a passenger seat. So more passengers on board. Autonomous flying, so we're eliminating pilot error. Incredible. It's coming.
Yeah, no, it's pretty incredible. It's interesting what's happening in London with obviously the sad situation at the moment with lockdown, but also what's happened in bikes and e-bikes. There's a kind of second explosion, which I think is a real positive step. So e-bike. If you haven't tried anyone out there, I'd recommend trying an e-bike. It's definitely changed my life. Absolutely.
Yeah, e-bikes are incredible. I mean, people are starting to wake up and realize that we got to stay healthy. We got to get out and do it. And what better way than to just an e-bike is a pretty amazing thing. Whether you're on road or off road, it's the new age of bicycle. 2 wheels. Yeah. Even in motorcycles, I mean, if you go to the TT, up in the Isle of Man, those electric bikes are lapping at over 100 miles an hour.
Incredible!
And to see one go by, it's just mind blowing.
Well, we'll have to link up and get you on a Cooper e-bike. See what you think.
I look forward to it. I remind you that.
No, please do. Right, I'm going to do a few questions. I've got a few sent through here, so we'll get through. Let me pick a few of these. So here we go. So from, I think it's Form. When does Frank think the electric car production will overtake combustion engines?
I think it's going to happen like a hockey stick. We call it a hockey stick in the sense of sales, basically. It goes along pretty flat, and we've been waiting for it to rise up like at a 45-degree angle, and that just hasn't happened. But as soon as they can get a few things improved, not that they don't have it, but improved, which is obviously range, and obviously the possibility to not have range anxiety, so you can basically charge up pretty much anywhere. That's very important. But the other thing that is very, very critical is the speed of recharging. So you don't want to sit around at the service station or the place along the motorway or the highway and wait half an hour for your car basically to have a new charge to it. So quick charging is an option, obviously, but we need to improve the speed of recharging.
Yeah.
And obviously, the most important one is the cost has to go down. So if you have your choice between a car that will pretty much do what it needs to do, is get you from A to B, but you're going to pay more for it, obviously that becomes a factor. So as soon as the prices start to head downwards in electric cars, I think we're going to see that hockey stick happen, where suddenly the sales will start to go maybe
just exploding.
But that doesn't answer the question. When's it going to happen? I'm a romantic. I don't want it to happen because I just want to hear a mechanical engine turning over and revving. That for me is what a car is all about, or an engine should do. A motor for me is a little bit like turning the light switch on. It's either on or off. And if it doesn't make any noise, then it's kind of losing one of its senses. It's like a person with 4 senses instead of 5. You're going to miss it, whether it be your sight, smell, any of those senses that you miss. It takes away a little bit of the 5 senses that you could have, or even 6 senses. People have a connection between colors and numbers. If you see a number, you have color. That's something people can't imagine, those who don't have it. But at the same time, I don't want it to happen, or at least I don't want it to take over. I want the option that people are able to drive petrol or mechanical engines rather than having electric engines take over and dominate and become the forced way of driving into a city, for example. I just think there is a little bit of room, although there's a bit of negativity to it, about biofuels. And I believe in biofuels. It's not my expertise, but if we could figure out a way to make fuel non-polluting or more efficient than it is currently, biofuels without polluting the atmosphere, environment, that would be a good jump for people who want a mechanical engine.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, electric cars in that sense that they're dominating over petrol-driven cars, probably the late 2020s, so
late 20s,
30s maybe. Yeah.
It's interesting saying about the senses. There's some amazing things happening with electric race cars. Even there's the VW IDR, I think, that broke the hill climb record at Goodwood. But when you go to, say, the Goodwood Revival, there's something special about looking at all those old cars from the 50s, 60s, and you get that smell as well, the Castrol R. I know some historic racers less are using it because there's synthetics that are faster, but that are better for running the engines. But that smell, it's that sound and that smell of historic racing is something special.
Yeah, I get it, Charlie. It's, that smell can take you back 20, 50, 15 years, whatever. Smells are so important for your memory. Sometimes you can see a color and it takes you back, 20 years or wherever, back to your youth. You can smell something, it takes you. When you see an electric car and you hear it and smell it, it's not going to take you anywhere except down the road, probably a little bit more efficiently than today. But at the same time, you're losing that emotional connection that vehicles are capable of giving you or having. And I think we're going to really miss that if we let go of if we let the governments run it and say, you can't come into the city without an electric car, then that's a sad time for humanity.
Yeah.
To start doing that. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully they'll always allow historics to go in. I can drive my Mark 1 Cooper S into town. Let's do two more questions because, like I said, I could ask you questions all day, but let's do one more about the Mini and then a kind of general one. So Christopher Flora asks, you design so many different unique cars. What enables you to come up with such beautiful designs while keeping all the cars looking so unique? And that's a great question because there is some brilliant designers out there that have their style and you kind of see it throughout. But you've designed so many completely unique cars. It's how do you do it?
It's not how I do it. It's just I love design, and I don't want to be pigeonholed as a designer because I love all types of design, be it architecture, furniture, fashion, whatever. I get most of my influence for designs from nature. That might be one of the commonalities that I have in my designs, is that somewhere along the thread of the design process, an eagle will pop in, or a tiger, or a fish, or whatever. It'll be part of the design philosophy, not just because it looks cool, but because nature offers the best. Obviously, the best design solutions to problems. But I mean, if you're an actor in the movie industry, the film industry, do you just want to do a certain type of film all your life and be categorized as a certain type of actor? I think that would be at the beginning fun, but at the end you'd probably be very bored with your life. You've only ever played a certain role. So those actors, like Jack Nicholson, no matter what role he plays, he does it in a way that makes the film success and very unique and a hit typically. So I kind of admire that quality in people who, like I said at the beginning, have that capability of being multifaceted or being able to do different papers and not get stereotyped. So I've not forced myself. I just think it's a natural tendency for me to just want to be different or try different things all the time.
Yeah. No, it's he in the Ford versus Ferrari Le Mans film. I've forgotten his name, but he plays often very different characters. The Welsh actor Christian Bale. He's quite impressive because he gets big and small for roles. It's quite amazing.
Was he Batman?
He was Batman as well. Yeah.
Look up there in the corner. Can you see that?
That's Batman. Is that Batman?
That's Batman. I should take a walk around my studio. There's a lot of people in here. Thor is over there. Hulk's behind me. Can you see a Hulk?
Oh yeah, I can see Hulk. I'd love to see your studio. It looks lots of interesting things. Right, let's do one more about the Mini, because, like I said, I could to chat to you all evening, but we'll probably get in trouble with the Mini guys. So let's ask this one. What is your absolute favourite memory of designing the Mini?
Phew, gosh, so many of them. That is a really good question. It wasn't. If I have to nail one, it's probably a well-told story by now, and I probably will have to repeat it another 1,000 times. But it is a favorite story and favorite experience and favorite memory I have of doing the Mini. I'm sorry for all those who already know the story, but the question is, what was my favorite thing about it? So memory. So I'll have to just repeat it for those who already know it. But again, it's coming from the horse's mouth, if you want to call it that way, and it's absolutely true. So those who haven't heard about it, believe me, it is true to the absolute. I remember on the night we had, like I said, that 6-month period to create the new Mini. So the last 5 months of that 6-month period was used building the clay model with a team of 5 guys who would create that car in clay for you. So it's a big team. Well, not really a big team, but it's the right amount of people to build a car out of clay for you. So we were in this hole-in-the-wall studio in downtown Munich, and the show, the shootout, as we call it, was going to happen the next day. This was October '95. And no matter how much time you have to do a project like this, it's never enough. So we'd run the clock out on actually preparing the full-size clay for the show the next day, Friday at 10 a.m. At midnight the night before, so going from Thursday into Friday, right around midnight, it's about 10 hours before the car is going to be shown. We finally wrapped it up. We're standing there, myself and the 5 modelers, looking at it. And this was, like I said, October '95, and we were completely ecstatic because this was 5 years before launch. Yeah. And you can imagine 5 years before launch of any project or product, that thing has to look, pretty futuristic and pretty cool. Yeah. And we'd done that. We basically had achieved a car after that 6 months that was wow, looking at it. So we thought, if anybody beats the other 14 guys, any of them beat this project, we got to hand it to them because this has got to be the one they choose. So obviously the 5 guys who were actually most of them were English. They liked their drink. They ordered out. One of the younger guys had to go get some shots around the corner, bar around there. So he came back with a lot of shots and kept going back and forth. And obviously, slowly the clay modelers got pretty tipsy. Well, not tipsy. They got drunk. So they ended up flat on their backs at some point, like around 3 a.m. They were completely out of it. So it was a celebration, I guess, of wrapping up 6 months of intense, or 5 of intense work. And I had to make sure at about 4 a.m. that the car was in great shape before the show, so nothing was coming off of it. It looked real, but obviously it was just painted, and the chrome was not real chrome, and that. But basically, you stood 30 feet away from this 1-to-1 scale Mini Cooper, and you thought it was real. Yeah. So walking around the car, making sure all the things were stuck on properly, I froze behind the car and realized, one of these moments like that where you think, yeah, there's always something you forget. And I was staring at the where the exhaust pipe should be, and we hadn't even thought about putting an exhaust pipe on this car. And I thought, in a moment of desperation, I got to put something on the back because this car needs the exhaust pipe. And I went up to the chief modeler, Colin Lang. I said, Colin, as he's drinking his beer. He was a beer man and loved his Budweiser. But anyways, I said to Colin, we got to get an exhaust pipe on, Colin. It's 4 a.m., but we got to do it quick. And he's like, you're crazy. Look, the guys are flat on their backs. They're out of their heads. They can't work. And I'm not going to start at 4 a.m. to make an exhaust pipe for you. So I said, okay, I'll have to do it, Colin. So I grabbed his Budweiser can. And if any of you don't know, I mean, it's like a Coke can or whatever, soft drink can. I cut it in half and threw away the top half of the can. And I took some steel wool and polished the outside of the can, so got all the Budweiser labeling off of it. And those cans have that nice little rib on the bottom of the can. So I turned it upside down and put a hole in the bottom of the can. So the end of the half of the can basically looked like a cylinder with a nice edge to it, rolled tip on it with a nice little hole in there. And I shoved it into the clay And Colin came over and we started looking at it and we started laughing our heads off because it was absolutely the most amazing looking exhaust pipe you'd ever seen in your life. But we thought, okay, maybe we're a little bit tipsy. Maybe it's because of that why we're laughing. We thought, let's just leave it. The next day in the show, the 15 cars were presented. The new Mini, the one that came out, was voted 14-0 as the car to become the new Mini. 7 BMW execs and 7 Rover execs all agreed on it. So then my boss at the time, Chris Spangle, came up to me afterwards and said, great, Frank, this car is going to launch your career. Well done, but never, ever waste a modeler's time making such a detailed exhaust pipe. And he thought the guy who made it was on the lathe a full day or 6 hours, turning this expensive tube of alloy into an exhaust pipe. And of course, I was too embarrassed to tell him it took me 4 minutes and that it was a Budweiser can. So I kept my mouth shut. I didn't say anything. And a couple years later, the supplier who actually makes the exhaust tips of what would be the exhaust tip of the Mini came over to BMW and asked me, what would you like the exhaust tip to look like? And I had that can on my desk that was from there, and I gave it to him. And he didn't know what it was. He just thought it was the real thing. He had no idea it was a Budweiser can, so they made it. The company made it, and then we put it on the Mini. And then for the 2000 to 2006 Cooper, the exhaust pipe was the Budweiser can, and nobody really, we weren't allowed to tell people and express it or anything. So it was fascinating.
That's amazing.
Later, what that became without at the moment realizing that it was going to become so cool.
It's great that 20 years later you can tell it now. You had to probably keep your mouth shut for a while.
I wouldn't be here if I opened my mouth at that time.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, Frank, like I said, I could chat to you. We'll have to do this in person next time. Hopefully things change and we don't have to do this virtually. But thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure.
We'll continue on the river, on the Thames, on the boat.
Oh, let's do, maybe with a can of Budweiser as well.
Yeah, on the other side, when we get out of this complicated situation, we will.
Brilliant. Good. Thank you so much, Frank. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks so much, guys. Thanks, Mini Canada, and thanks, Charlie.
Cheers.
Bye.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you, Frank. That was brilliant. Like I said, we could have kept on going, but yeah, thank you all for joining. So we're back next week. We've got another special guest next week. We've got Carlos Sainz, the rally legend and current Dakar champion with Mini. So if you join us next week, it's 2 p.m. Eastern in North America and 7 p.m. UK time. Cheers, guys.